Oh my God, Pabel. When I first got COVID, I tested positive and I'm like, oh, it can't be as bad as like the first time. And then COVID said bet. And your girl was
Bet.
just like stuck in bed for like Monday, Tuesday. I was like, I can't move.
Oof. Well, hope you feel
Yeah.
better.
So happy to be here though. How are you, Pabel? Checking in on me. How are
Same.
you?
Same. Nah. Yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm actually really excited. I'm actually launching like a new segment to the podcast, which I'm really excited about. It's gonna be a live YouTube series every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the idea is that I don't know if y'all ever applied for a job and saw like these generic ass job descriptions. It'd be like coordinated with cross-functional teams to drive exceptional growth in product areas. And it's just like, what does that even mean?
Every
So,
job
and
description.
also, right? Yeah. So I'm inviting people from our community that have those jobs that a lot of people want to apply for, want to land. And we're gonna walk through like how they got the job and what does it take to be successful in that role. Also, as well, like I want y'all to think of when you think of engineers, I don't want you to think about Mark Zuckerberg. I want you to think of people that look like y'all. So I'm highlighting people from our community that are doing the damn thing in a live career day segment. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. It's gonna launch in August, so probably like in 2 weeks. Odalys already signed up, which is exciting. But yeah,
Mhm.
let me know if there's any specific like career paths, because that's another thing too. Like, there's so many career paths that like I don't even know exist still. I'm like,
Oh
damn,
yeah.
Odalys, that's your
Mhm.
job? Like, I didn't know you did that. So yeah,
Mhm.
just want to raise awareness for like so many things that are out there. So if there are any
Yeah.
specific career paths that y'all have in mind that you think like yo Pavel has no idea this exists, let me put them on. Hit me up, so that we could feature it.
Yeah, can I give Babel, I want to give you your flowers real quick because I think this is so much bigger than just like, like you're doing career days. I think this is something that is just so needed in the community because let me tell you, I didn't even know my job was a job either. Like to be completely honest, I didn't know project management
Yeah.
was something that was a possibility that could pay well. And I think that you're doing something so big for the community because people need to know what these job descriptions mean. Honestly, when I found out what cross functional meant, I was like, oh, that's what cross functional means. I'm like, I've been doing that. You know what I mean? Like, I think people, corporate loves to fluff words and like over corporatize things that I'm like, we do on a daily. So I think you're
Yeah.
doing something really big and spreading that knowledge and awareness to the community. So flowers all given to you because this is big.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's crazy too because I feel like these conversations, just like the ones that we're having sort of like on the podcast, they're typically had in secret, right? Like if you're interested in like a project management role, like you hit up your homegirl and be like, yo, can I schedule like a coffee chat with you? Like 30 minutes, just like
Hmm.
one on one. But like, why aren't we sharing that information with the world? Like, why don't we let everyone know that there's like an events role that like people have no idea about?
Right.
So I'm trying to like bring some of these private conversations that we're already having more so just like to a
Hmm.
public forum.
It'd be really interesting, not to give you ideas, but for these career days too, I think something that I learned in my career that was super surprising is the just different teams that exist within tech.
Yeah.
Like, this is the early career talent team, this is the corporate team, this is this team, this is that team. I think that's a really interesting narrative to talk about as well because I had no idea. I'm like, oh, y'all don't just all work together. Like, y'all work in
Yeah.
different, teams, departments, and business units, and this and that. I think that's a really, really interesting thing to highlight in those career days.
Yeah, yo, I was talking to my boy at Google, for example, and I'm like, yo, I just met this other person at Google. They're on this, and that team. They were like, I'm sorry, what? At Google that exists? I'm like,
Hmm.
like even if you work within the company, you don't know that. I gotta talk to HR and just be like, yo, can I just get a list of every single team? Like just list them, like one to
Right.
200. Just list them out.
You really should because I had no idea. I'm on the emerging talent team. When I started to tell my homies at LinkedIn that I worked on this team, they were like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, we do XYZ." And they're like, "Oh, that's part of your team?" Like, I had no idea. Like, there's so many damn teams in these corporate systems that I'm like, it's just super interesting to know about too, as someone who's first gen trying to navigate that space. Like, oh, maybe I don't want to work in emerging talent, or maybe emerging talent is my future. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's It's just a really, really interesting thing that you should
Yeah.
educate the community on.
Yeah. And last thing, which is like really funny, like if you scroll on TikTok or Instagram, and we're all guilty of it, right? It's kind of like, hey, follow me in a day in the life of X position. It's just the highlights though. You know what I mean? Like we're gonna show you
Oh
the
yeah.
parties that we go to, we're gonna show you the free lunch, but like there's like things that we think are boring as far as like, look at this spreadsheet I'm working on. That may be boring to us, but there's people out there that are like, oh, finally, I understand what it means to do that. Or when people be
Right.
like, oh, I go to a bunch of meetings, they're like, what do y'all talk about in the meetings? You know what I mean? That like may
Hmm.
seem so boring and mundane to us because we do it every day, but then to somebody else, they're like, finally, that's what that meant.
Right. Yeah. There's so much. Again, Babel, take all them flowers, take all of them, do a little base because this is huge. This is a really, really big thing. And I think to me, what it triggers is this thought of like that's generational knowledge that we can continue to pass down to other people in our community. And I'll tell you this quick story before we get into the topic, but
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with our Beyond San Jose State, my alma mater, their Beyond Sports program. So it's all student athletes that are thinking about their career beyond sports, which is really hard for an athlete, right? Because their whole
That's
life is
dope.
sports. But it's a program that literally educates them on like these are the different career paths you can take if you don't make it to the NFL, if you don't make it to the NBA, right? Super dope. And a lot of those students that I work with, I adore them because they all remind me of my brothers. But I think for me, it's interesting to hear them think of their value only on the football field or on the soccer field or on the basketball court. And the more I talk to them and I'm like, well, what do you do in your position, right? Like what do you do? And I remember one athlete was like, well, you know, I'm really trying to like look out for everyone on my team. So I have to memorize not only my play, I have to memorize what they're doing in their plays. And like I have to do this and that and like has to know where everyone is at all times. And I'm like, yo, that sounds like project management. That's what I do. You know what I mean? And we had a whole
Yeah.
conversation about that. And he was like, really? Like, I can do that too? And I'm like, yes. And like, you have to strategize. You have to know what everyone is doing. Everyone's in different places, but you have to know exactly where they're at and how to show up for them. Right. And we just had this really dope conversation. And Babel, his eyes were like, what? Like, I didn't even know that was an option. Right. And I think it's just, and even to say, I mean, not to say every corporate can offer six figures, but I think at some point in your career, tech can get you there faster. And I talked to him about that. And again, his mind, he's a Latino football player.
Hmm.
He didn't come
Hmm.
from a lot. So he's just like, he was blown away at every word I was saying. And I say this because I think it just starts with the knowledge piece, and we can really change the game for not just our community, for people that don't come from that knowledge, that don't come from that type of families who are first gen trying to just navigate these systems. And I just, again, more flowers to you, but I think it's a really dope generational knowledge that we're starting to trigger.
That's such a dope experience. I got to hear about that. Like
Hmm.
on a maybe I'll call you on the side and hear about that. But that's really cool.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're looking at everyone's comments. I see the Web3 educator. I love that project management. Victor, I love how
Mm.
you transitioned from government to advertising. Yeah, and you were just like, I had no idea I could be a
Ooh.
strategist. That's what I'm saying, right? Like you
Mm.
get exposed to a whole new industry, and you're like, oh shit, these
Yeah.
skills transfer. Noel, you already know what's up. Delo mio.
What's up,
Strategy,
Noah?
yeah, strategy and ops is a whole world too. 100% agree. Tech world is huge. We're always thinking about like 3 to 5 years plans ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Look at these. I don't even know about some of these roles. Right? Look
Nope.
at that. Love that. Love that. But that's the intro for today. We got two things essentially that we were planning on talking about today. We got like a current event segment, which we'll talk about a little bit and chat about some of the things that are happening in the world that we thought we were really interesting. And then the sort of main piece where we're going to talk about is decision making and how we
Mm.
navigate the world and even think about making decisions, whether it's for us or our families as well.
Yep.
You
Yep.
wanna
Let's
get
get
into
into it.
the current events?
I do. I want to start with, first of all, though, the state of the pledge. So, educate us on what the state of the pledge 2021 is. And I want to dive deep into that.
Yes, let's do that. And give me 1 second. I'm gonna get my iPad.
Oh, go for it. What's up, y'all? Y'all are making my day already because I woke up just like, okay, headaches coming in, but I'm excited for Unfiltered, and now my energy is just like on 10.
Yo, yeah, me too. My energy is up there as well. All right. So remember, y'all, when everything was going on with the murder of George Floyd and the aftermath of what that was, the protests, the promises from corporations that they were essentially like, yo, we need to change. Rightfully so, right? So everybody was making promises. Some of them were performative, some of them were real, but like people were just like throwing money at the problem essentially, right? Y'all remember that? Okay. Well, have you ever wondered like who's keeping track of that? Like, are they keeping their promises? Like, was there even a change? And there's a report that actually keeps track that essentially kept track and made a summary of all of that, looking back at like all the promises that were made and then looking at the state of where things are today from the lens of the Black population, although um there are certain references of other groups as well. So it's a 37 page report, and I'm telling you, y'all, it is pure gold. I highly encourage y'all to read it. Just look up State of the Pledge 2021, and there were about 217 companies analyzed, and they just pull out a bunch of stats on things that they promised and like where we are today. But it's a fascinating report. Have you checked it out, Alice?
I have, and I'm curious to know what you think. I'm being quiet for a reason. I'm like, what's Pabel thinking in his head about this state of the pledge? Because I think when he first told me about this, I was like, wait. Someone actually kept track of all of it. I think it's such a dope way to hold these companies accountable because I think what's starting to happen now, and Pabel, I'd love to know what you think from your lens, but I'm starting to see a lot of LinkedIn posts about this concept of diversity hire, which I think is not new and it's been around. But I think people are starting to like go against this like narrative that like we're gonna hire you because you're Black, Latino, and you know, you're a diversity number. And I think it's just such an interesting thing. And I recently had a conversation with the VP of Divs at LinkedIn. We did a speaker series with her. And one of the questions I asked her is, okay, we're doing well on our diversity numbers, right? Whatever that means. And how are we showing up for those communities when they're actually here? Are we giving them the tools, the resources, the opportunities to have the same career growth in relation to their white colleagues, right? Like, are they having those same opportunities, those same pathways? And it's just really interesting to see this report and just see these companies that are really not making a lot of moves. It was just all hearsay.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I have, and part of this whole like career series thing is just like getting different people's perspectives and having them share their stories around like what it's like to be that specific role in these companies. And I'm actually gonna be including some recruiters, and they have heard from their colleagues like, oh, implement the Rooney Rule. And I don't know how much I know about the Rooney Rule, but it's this rule that was implemented in football, essentially saying that if we have an opening for a head coach, we have to include at least one Black head coach candidate in the interview process, right? And the idea is like, well, we're forcing diverse candidates into this process, and the idea is like at least we're giving someone an opportunity, right? But what ends up happening a lot of times is that they add a Black candidate, a Latino candidate into that specific role, and they do it just as a formality, not necessarily giving them an opportunity, like a actual opportunity to get the role. They're kind of just there like, oh, let's throw a Black person in there just to say we did it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's been happening a lot. There's even a story. His name is I think Richie Flores or Richard Flores. He was a coach that was in the Miami Dolphins, and he actually said that they did that to him. I think the New York Giants in another organization, and he ended up suing the NFL and the organization for like these like racist practices, essentially.
Oh my goodness. I had a conversation recently, and I want to bring it up. I won't disclose anything about this conversation, where it was and who it was with, but essentially they said, well, isn't it good that they're doing those rules, right? The Rooney Rule, the diversity hire. Isn't it good that they're hiring people because they're Black and Latino? Because she's like, well, isn't that what they were doing to white people all the time? Like they would just say, oh, you're white, so I want to hire you. Oh, you're white, I want to like interview you. And you're Black and Latino, I don't want to interview you. And when she said that to me, I was kind of like, what? And I see what she was trying to say, but she wasn't saying it in the way that I agreed with, to be honest. And I'm just curious, that like conversation still I've been thinking about here and there of like, I wonder what she like, I wonder if that's how about it. Like it was a white woman who I was speaking to, and just curious, like, what do you think about that, Bobby? Isn't that like a weird, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it.
Well, I like the idea of looking at the number of candidates that we have available, and you looking at it and being like, oh shit, we only have white people here. Let's diversify the mix of candidates before we move forward. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's wild that you even have to make a rule to force people to think about it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, let's add a Black person here. Let's add a Latino. Let's add a woman. Like, I would hope in 2022 you would just realize that in general, and you wouldn't have to necessarily have a rule. But I also get the need to force people to do those certain things. I just wish that if you were including a diverse candidate, you weren't just doing it to check a box, and you were doing it more so like, I would hope that you include that diverse candidate because of the skills and their competence, and they just happen to be Black,
Right.
not including them
Right.
because they're Black. You know what I mean? Like, them being Black should be like a secondary. It shouldn't be the primary reason why you're including them in the mix.
Right.
It should be like an added benefit that they're able to add a diverse perspective. It shouldn't be the reason why you add them in there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And just to add a little more context to that, I feel like something that I've seen, and I'm curious if there's numbers on this and what the demographics are, but I think it starts with the people who are the hiring managers, who are the recruiters. I mean, do we have enough representation in those places? Because it's really hard to like hire someone that you just can't relate with in your community. You know what I mean? Like, of course, they're going to have that bias in their head. If it's, for example, if it's a white woman who's a recruiter and she's only bringing in these white candidates, it's just like a bias, right? Like, you just don't know what you don't know. And like your comment of like, it's 2022, like we should know by now. Like,
Mhm.
you kind of just have to, get everyone in here that has that skill and competency. And there's a problem if you see that they all look the same, come from the same places. But I think too, do we have that representation in that recruiter or hiring manager space in
Mm.
general? Because they just don't see what they don't see, because they don't realize there's anything wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting? I think like, well, and I want to share some stats with y'all because it's because in these, I read all the 37 pages and I took out some stats so y'all don't have to read all 37 pages. But some of these stats are just like, whoa, crazy. But what's interesting too is that I think often we put so much responsibility on recruiters to create this magical place for us, but we have way more power than we think in creating these environments. I'm gonna give you a great example. My man Dominic, who works at Meta right now, he saw that there's very low representation for people that look like him, right? And he saw that, oh shit, people that are getting hired are often referred, right? But how often you get somebody reaches out to you and you're like, yo, can you submit a referral for me? And I've been there too. I'm like, oh, another one. Like, yo, I'm busy. We're all busy. Do I really want to set aside time to do this? Right. But we have the power to like refer as many people as he want. Yo, when I tell you, this man took it upon himself to share his referral to everybody on LinkedIn. He was like, yo, send me your resume. I'll refer anybody. Just like send it to me. How often do people do that? And like, obviously he was
Mhm.
looking out for his people, right? So he was like, yo, I want to increase the number of Black and Latino representation at this company. Send me your thing and I'll refer you. He referred like hundreds of people. But how many people are going to dedicate like a whole Friday to doing that? You know what I mean? And like, these
Mhm.
are people that he didn't even know. He just posted it on LinkedIn and like random people. And now if you follow him, he actually posts screenshots of people getting the job and messaging him. He was like, yo, you changed my life. You know, like that.
Wow.
How many people are going to do
Wow.
that? I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, let's keep it real. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to your homie because that's so dope. That's real dope.
So
And
let me,
I'll,
oh, go for it.
I was going to tell you, I recently had a conversation with someone too. This is actually like a few weeks ago. I won't disclose name or where she works, but she said that she referred so many people to the company and she's only been able to get one hire. And this is after like years of working there. I don't know how long, but it's been over a decade.
Mhm.
And she shared with me, like, she's like, but I go in there and I see these frat bros that all know each other, all come from the same fraternity, and they're all working at the company. And
Yeah.
she's like, and why have my referrals not even gotten a job interview at this
Yeah.
company? And I think it's really interesting. And I love these two stories because shout out to your homie. I think that's just the power of networking. And I've been a LinkedIn fan before I started working here, so I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid, but I love the power of LinkedIn too. Just the algorithm compared to a lot of these other social media platforms is just slept on, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I think too, there's this other side of people who are trying to be those referrals, those change makers, but can't seem to like get through, to the system. So I wonder if there's like an idea for your homie, but I wonder if there's a way for us to continue referring people in the best way possible. Maybe there's best practices, keywords we need to use. Like, how do we start to create that pathway or that like referral system where people can get at least one interview? You know what I mean?
Yeah. My homie at Google does the same thing. He gets really frustrated because he's referred so many people and some of them haven't even gotten a call for an interview. So it is really
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah.
Dora, what's up? A lot of people here. All right. So what's interesting is that these are some stats that I pulled from, again, this 2022 State of the Pledge by The Plug. They looked at all the performative promises that were made after the murder of George Floyd from all these companies, and they did a whole 37-page report of pure gold. But these are some stats that I pulled that was like fascinating. And again, they didn't look at every single company, but they did look at 217 different ones. So what's interesting is that 27% of these 217 companies provided at least one diversity report between 2019 and 2021. If y'all not familiar with the diversity report, it's essentially a lot of big tech companies, they look at their employee base and they publish a diversity report to say these are the number of men, women, these are the demographics that we have as far as African American, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Asian, etc. They'll even break it down by types of roles. So they keep those demographics and say like technical versus non-technical roles. They'll say whether they're in a leadership position or individual contributor, but only 27%. So like a very small percentage of companies even publish these reports. Like right now, there's no law or policy across the board that like mandates these companies to post it. So in many ways, like we don't even know how diverse most companies even are, which is like really interesting. I didn't know that not everyone posts that. And I understand why. Like they're probably scared to share that data and say like, oh shit, we're not as diverse as we talk about. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
that one was really interesting. And I'll just read off a couple more and we can talk about it. But so Black professionals make up 5% of the overall tech workforce. And it's just a 1% increase over the past 7 years. Fascinating. And then financial commitments pledged by these tech companies accounted for 0.3% of 2021 revenue. And lastly, this one is fascinating. Tech companies that issued public pledges had an average of 20% fewer Black employees than those companies that did not issue commitments, which made me think about, oh, are companies that are issuing commitments and donating money just like throwing money at the problem, but then on the back end, like not doing what they said they were going to do? I thought that was the most fascinating one. 20%
Mm,
fewer Black employees than those that did not issue public commitments.
sheesh.
Yeah. And as well, like a lot of these quotes are about the Black population, but if you look at any of these diversity reports, they're typically right aligned with
Hmm.
Latino population as well. Like the 5% of overall tech workforce being Black is typically the case for Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic communities as well.
Yeah, shout out to Pabel for those numbers because, and really, y'all look at the diversity report or the state of the pledge report because I think it just, those numbers tell really unfortunate but like powerful stories about
Yeah.
the work that needs to be done in these spaces.
Yeah. And I'm curious for those that are watching, like, does your company provide a diversity report? Like, do y'all even know how diverse your companies are? I know that it's something that's really popularized in like large tech companies, but I know it's not something that every job necessarily has. So I'd be curious.
Did you, Pabel, look at the Meta diversity report a lot when you were working there or TikTok? Did you ever, is that something that you were like about when you were at Meta or TikTok? Like, well, I'm going to look at their diversity report. Or is that something that was kind of like later in your career?
So TikTok didn't do one when I was there, and they still don't do one. I don't know how, I don't know when or if they will ever do one, just because of they're a Chinese owned company. And I don't know if that's like, I don't know, part of their priorities. I have no idea. But when I was at Meta, I did look at it pretty often. But that said, like, I don't need to look at it. I could just look around. I know I know what the numbers were gonna be. But I
Yeah.
did look at it though. I did look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's you know what's funny? As part of that career day segment that I was talking about, I actually reached out to a couple friends at TikTok, and they were like, "Yo, the PR team, they don't want us to do it because of you, because the way you left TikTok." I was like, "Oh."
Oh my God. How does, okay, well, how does that feel for you? How does that feel? I want to unpack this a little more.
Yeah, yeah. Wait, let me so in the commercial real estate industry, there's only 2% African Americans. I'm not sure the stats on Latino
Oh.
community. Interesting. Wait, Jason says
Oh, my
Amazon
man works
reported.
in commercial.
Oh, there you go. He's part of that
Yeah,
2%,
and
maybe?
he is part of that 2%. He's Black and Latino, and he's only met in the Bay Area specifically. He's only ever met one other Black realtor, but he's not even in Bay Area. I think the Black realtor is in like I think Oakland or LA, like somewhere outside of the Bay Area. Yeah, he doesn't see, and trust me, I've been to his company parties and I see no diversity.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, I could
like
only
everyone,
imagine.
and then there's my man's walking around.
And then this my man. He doesn't even get lost. So you can point him out like so easily.
No, he's just like, oh, it's just Alex, the Boricua guy.
So Amazon reported 28% Black and 23% Latino employees in 2021.
Oh
But
wow.
this is the interesting part in about most of the diversity reports is that they break it out by like job function. Is that like all warehouse, for example? Is that like on the corporate side? Because that's a big difference as well, because that dictates like the big pay difference, like how much we're paid too.
Hmm. I mean, I
Um,
know on for LinkedIn for the 2021 diversity report, and I know this because I just had this conversation, but I think the tech specific workforce only one point, I'm looking at the numbers right now, 1.8, 3.4 of the overall tech workforce is Latino for LinkedIn, and then 1.8 is Black. So, I mean, it's
wow.
low. Tech specifically, tech functions, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I go in there and I see all my Latinos. They're walking around cleaning and they're cooking, and I'm like,
Oh.
"Hola, Luis, ¿cómo estás?" and it's so and it's so funny because I think who was I was talking to somebody. I think it was on my podcast or you. I can't tell these days, but I had a conversation around that's sometimes my comfort zone as I go into the office and the
Mm.
first people I want to talk to are the cleaners, the cooks, the people that I can speak Spanish with. I feel like familia. And it's just And I'm lucky that LinkedIn does have that Latino representation, and I'm able to find my Latinos here and there. And, we find each other, we just like gravitate toward each other. But I think too, it's sometimes a comfort zone, and I'm learning how to speak to other people that maybe aren't in my community in those ways too, and like network and build relationships with them. It's a little harder, but
Yeah. It's a little harder, but it's necessary to advance. Priscilla, like, yeah, I'm part of that 23%. What's up?
hey.
That's dope. All right. So we checked in on current events. Anything else you want to check in? Anything else you want to discuss about current events before we get into like our segment on decision making?
Now let's get into it.
Let's get into it. All right. So there's so much we could talk about when it comes to decision making. I mean, it sounds corny, but like we make decisions every day, like hundreds of times. You know what I mean? And sometimes I feel like we're making decisions for us, or sometimes we feel the need to make decisions on behalf of other people, whether it be loved ones and family and all of those kind of things. I'm sure you're probably like in a different place when it comes to making some of those decisions based on like all the work that you've done. And I'm sure therapy has been like a big help with that. Talk to me about like how therapy's helped you in your process and how you think about making decisions on a day-to-day basis.
Oh my God, it's helped me so much. I think what it's helped me uncover is when I'm making decisions for myself, or I'm making decisions that I think my parents would want me to make because they made all these sacrifices for me to be here. You know what I mean? I'm constantly battling those two. And sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're aligned, and I'm like, well, that's what I want too. But I think for a long time, I'm the youngest of seven. I'm the youngest Latina in a big family of like mostly guys. And I feel like I always had decisions made for me, like it was like, you don't have an option of where you want to go eat. We're going to go eat here. Or you don't have an option of what we're going to do today. We're just going to do this. I felt like that just came with being the youngest one in the room. Like you just kind of like flowed, you know what I mean? Um, and so I feel like the first time I ever made a decision was to apply for college and leave home for college. And
Wow.
I think for a long time, I didn't know the difference between what I wanted and what was expected of me. And therapy has helped me differentiate the two and just made me really clear on what it is I want. And I'm not saying that it's easy every single time making a decision. I'm like, oh, that's what I want, like 100%. Like there's
Yeah.
still a thought process that comes with it, but therapy has helped me differentiate those two. But you do therapy too. How has it helped you in your decision making?
It's interesting because you and I were talking about this the other day about not love languages, but there are attachment styles in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, for those that are listening, y'all gotta do the attachment style quiz. It is so
Yes.
informative, and you think it's just for like romantic relationships, but the more that I looked into it, and this is what therapy's help is like forced me to do. It's forced me to just be more self-reflective on like who I am as a person and going into like why I make certain decisions that I make. And I think we're the same, a little bit the same in this part of like taking that quiz and even going to therapy has helped me realize like how hyper independent I am. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like everybody's a little independent, but like I am hyper independent. And it's not like, oh, I don't need anybody, blah, blah. Like we all need people to like add to our happiness and all that kind of stuff. But like I get my fulfillment from getting individual accomplishments. Like I need to check the box and say like I did something, I created something, I succeeded in some way for myself. Fuck everybody else. Like that brings me a lot of joy. And I think realizing that early on and realizing that I need to do that often and like knowing that that makes me happy helps me make decisions moving forward. The challenge in making some of those decisions though is like letting everyone else know so that they don't get offended. And I've had this in like
Mm-hmm.
romantic relationships. I've had this in at work as well. But sometimes I need to be like alone and driving that individual accomplishment. And then I'll come back to like society. But I made a post on this on LinkedIn as well. But like when I remember when I was in corporate at Facebook, like I got in trouble because like I never worked at my desk, for example. But I had to make that decision to be like, I need to work alone in order to be productive, to feel successful, and then I'll come back to y'all. But people will call me like, he's unfriendly, he's not a team player, he's this and that, and I would get like certain labels when it wasn't the case. But I always knew that about myself, but communicating that to
Oh,
others
wow.
was difficult for me.
Oh, well, I didn't know you had that quote unquote reputation.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, yeah.
Yeah, it was weird as
Yeah,
hell
that's
because
so interesting.
Meta too, like working for a social media company, it's like social, right? So it was very common to like add each other on Instagram, on Facebook, to keep up with each other.
Mm.
And like I would be in one-on-one meetings with my manager, and he would tell me, like, you and y'all, like your team, y'all don't seem like y'all friends. Like, do y'all hang out after work? I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, do I need to hang out with them after work? Like, he was trying to push me to to be like best friends with my team. It was
You're
really
like, do
weird.
they want to go get hookah and then
Yeah,
salsa with me?
yeah, yeah.
They'll be like, now we want charcuterie board and brunch.
Yo, there was a point where like I almost got an Equinox subscription just to go to the gym with them. And I was like, yo,
No
I'm
way.
not doing this. I almost did it. Yeah, yeah.
No one should be paying that Equinox membership. It's nice in there, but that's a crazy.
Okay, Victor, it sounds like I'm not the only one that needs their time alone to be productive and make things happen.
Mm, mm.
I
I
think
think
another
it's
interest. Oh, go for it.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Pavel.
Nah, well, what I was gonna say is I think another interesting thing in decision making is like, yeah, you know what you'd like to do in order to make yourself happy, but I think a really big thing is like, how do you say no to people? Like, how did you figure out how to say no to people?
Hmm. This one's the one I'm still learning. I'm like, damn, calling myself out right now. But I think this one's something I'm still learning is how to say no and how to be okay with the no. I think, I think this stems from just like you always wanting to, I don't know, the women in my family like always made things happen. Like they never said no to anything. They were like, oh, ¿quieres pastel? ¿Quieres tamales? Like, bien, te lo hago. And I grew up thinking like you never say no to people, like you just get shit done, you work hard, yeah, another project on my plate, like let's get it. You know what I mean? Like I think it was always just like continuously work, like work, work, work. And I'm still learning how to say no in the workplace, in life. And I'm getting better at it. I'm not like, I'm not great at it. But, if my friend is like, yo, let's get brunch today, or let's get dinner, let's go out, let's get drinks, I'm like, honestly, like, a girl's real tired and I don't really feel like it. Like, sometimes and I've been proud of myself whenever I do that because I think about how hard it used to be for me to say no to just like people, like my homies.
Mm,
Sometimes with my partner, I'm like, I really don't want to hang out right now. I just kind of want alone time. And that being respected in the relationship too is super dope. And because I'm the same way, I need that alone time for me to re-energize. And I think we both got that in our attachment style. Like we have that independent side. So funny. But I think just I'm starting to like ask for what I want in a way that honors me and honors them. And I recently saw that Brene Brown segment on HBO Max, and she said something, or one of her guests said something that stuck with me, and it said, "Boundary is the line in which I can love both me and you simultaneously." And that
oh,
stuck with me because it's so real. Because when I say no, I'm saying yes to myself. I'm saying yes to just like chilling on,
mm,
do some meditation. I'm saying yes to just chilling on my bed and like scrolling on my phone without guilt, or reading a book that I haven't read for a minute. You know what I mean? Like when I say no, I'm saying yes to a lot of other things. And I think if it's the homie, if it's a partner, if it's someone that truly vibes with you and rocks with you, I think they're going to respect that boundary. But I'm getting better at it. I'm not great. I think family and boundaries doesn't exist for me. I'm still learning that.
I
But
was
that's a different
just
that's a different story.
I was just gonna ask that. I'm like, all right, but like, who are you not comfortable with yet? Saying no
Yo, my
to? Is it
family, my
mom? Is it
family.
mom? You're not
It's
comfortable with
it's
mom
mom
yet?
and dad. It's mom and dad. I can't say no to them. I just can't. And I don't know how to navigate that. Like I just feel there's guilt there at the end of the day, and that's something my therapist called me out on recently, is that I have a lot of guilt, and with that guilt, it just spills over into a lot of different places. And I think when my mom is like, "Mija, necesito esto y el otro," I would just make it happen, because I'm just like, "Okay, mom." The one who was a single mom for years and did everything possible to like feed us and say yes to anything we needed, like, yes, I'll do anything for you. Yeah,
Yo,
it's a hard one.
that's funny. I saw another post. I didn't see the Brene Brown thing, but I saw another post on Instagram, I think it was, or TikTok, and they said no is a complete sentence. I was like, that's so true, because I feel like often, at least for me, I can say no, but I feel often the pressure to have an explanation attached to it.
Oh my, wow. You're saying that? That's hard, because I always thought guys were so good at just saying no. Like they were like, nah. That was my bias, because I'm like, even in emails, like, oh, I can't get to this because I have blah, blah. Like, I'm always explaining why I can't do something or why I can't go to the meeting. And I feel like the guys on my team are just like, can't make it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, damn it. Like, why do I over explain myself every single time? So that's interesting that you're saying that, because I thought guys had it down. Guess not.
That's interesting. I thought I was the one that was like left out talking about like I always need an excuse. I didn't know. God damn, I need to. Yeah, I
I
gotta. I
don't
don't
know.
know.
This is just what I've seen.
I wish I could do that. It's yeah. I like that's one of the things I'm working on. Like I think. Well, I think I've been in situations where I've been so accommodating for so long, where
Mm,
now like the pendulum has swung. I think maybe in sometimes like too far to my side, because I feel like I am so selfish. I'm talking about work, relation, everything. Like I'm so like,
mm,
nah, I'm all right. I'm gonna just do this. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna just do what I want to do. Where like I don't think I'm accommodating enough. And
mm.
like that thing that you said around like the boundary being the perfect place between like making you happy and others. Like I struggle with that. The idea of there can be both.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about like where am I comfortable saying no to, or like who am I comfortable with? And I think I might be too comfortable saying no to just about everybody, even my mom.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. But are you comfortable doing that in the workplace? Like, I mean, I know
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur now, but did you ever have trouble with that or no?
Yo, you know what's the most difficult thing for me to say no to nowadays? So it's my hourly rate for speaking engagements. So I have a rate and I
Mm.
share it with people sometimes, and then they come back to me and say like, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what's hilarious? Well, yeah, they say I'm sorry, like this is what we can do. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
honoring that fact of like, do I say yes or do I say no to an opportunity because it's too low?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Yo,
Mm.
but there, yo, when I was first starting out, when I first quit my job, I set my rate, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, we can't do that." And then like, all right, so I said like 4,000 was like my hourly rate. They said like, sorry, all I could do is two. And I'd be like, oh, I get it. You probably got some budget constraints. How about you do this, this, and that, and then ask for more budget. Then I'll come back to you. And they came back and were like, oh, sorry, we can't do that. Maybe next year. I was like, no, 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 wait, no, I'll do it for two. I'll do it for two. Like I was just so desperate.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But now I'm in a
Yeah.
better place where I feel like I don't have to be as desperate, so I can operate in a little bit of space of like comfort, and I could actually start saying no to opportunities that are like way below what I offer as a rate.
Yeah. Yeah. And honoring that, right? That's a whole other discussion about just that entrepreneurial, like, premium price versus like, a Walmart price. You know what I mean? I think it's a very I didn't know the word for it, but I think it's just the entrepreneurial decisions that we make is really hard. And one of the things that I remember talking to you about is how much do you charge? Because that's not something, I mean, I can't just go and ask my mom like, how much do like speakers charge for XYZ? And I just started hitting up a bunch of people I knew that were doing speaking engagements, and I'm like, how much do you charge? How much do you charge? And now being internal and hiring speakers, it's across the gamut. I mean, I see a lot of different speakers charge a lot of different things. And just that entrepreneurial side of things and decisions that we make as entrepreneurs could be a whole other unfiltered.
Yeah, I just started raising my prices, and it took a lot for me to be like, yes, this is what I charge now. But it's an interesting gamble, not gamble, but it's an interesting process around like when you decide to take something below your rate, and like just a thought process around it. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's something that I'm still working through, like, to this day.
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk about the decision of, and I know we talk about it a lot, but I think the decisions that we make in our careers, and I want to talk about just my experience of working for a lot of nonprofits, a lot of small businesses throughout my whole career. Oh, hey, Debbie. What's up, girl?
Debbie
Um,
Debbie
I
Cakes in the building.
Debbie Cakes. I know she's like smiling right now. But I think it's interesting the decisions that we make, and this is talking specifically from that first generation narrative of we need money and we don't have a safety
Mhm.
net. At least that was my decision. I need to make money. I don't have my parents to lean on. I know they will do anything in their power to try to help me in anything in any ways, but I think for me, a really interesting decision that I made in my career was to leave a small business where I had
Mhm.
full time benefits, full time everything. And I decided to leave it because I wanted to break into tech. And the way I'm doing that is through a contract role, which doesn't have benefits and doesn't have all those other things, right? But it does mean more money. And I think when I first told my parents I did that, they were like, wait, so you left a job with benefits for a job that doesn't have any benefits? And like, what? And it
Mhm.
was a really interesting like conversation to have with people that just don't get it. I'm like, no, this tech
Yeah.
has opportunities. Tech has like, it can set me higher in my career. And I think that's just one of the most interesting decisions I made in my career. I don't regret any of it at all. I'm so happy I did it, but I think it's a interesting decision that I think just need to talk about a little bit more about that breaking into tech story, because those contract roles, and I know Debbie Cakes has her own stories about contract roles too, and she's helped me navigate this whole world. So thank you, girl. But I think it's a really interesting decision that I still feel I want to talk a little bit more about with people who are making probably the same decision.
I just did a podcast today. It's called, I think, How to Talk to Mommy and Papi About Anything. And one of the things I was talking about was kind of like how our parents' advice has, I said, an expiration date. I think although it's well intentioned, like a lot of their advice is so outdated just because they've never been in the roles that we've been in. So, like,
Hmm.
is my abuela's advice about her working in a factory, should I apply that to me working at Meta? No. You know what I mean? Like, it's so nice
Right.
of, thank you, abuela. I really appreciate it. But like, that shit don't rock like
Oh,
that
they're
anymore,
so
you
cute
know?
though. They're so cute though.
Yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
try. They try. But yeah, just saying anything to them. And I want to talk about, Babette, your decision. I know we're at time, almost at time,
Yeah.
but your decision of becoming an entrepreneur. I mean, I saw, I see what that TikTok was paying you, and you posted about it. And I was like, what a decision to leave that all of that and just follow your passion and follow something that you so believe in and that the world really needs. If I'm being honest, like that decision for you, was that hard? Like saying bye to that paycheck?
Hard, yo. There's not a day that goes by where I don't look at LinkedIn and be like, yo, I should apply to that job. Every day I
Mm.
look at a job and I'm just like, I need to apply. I mean, look at all the hiring freezes, look at the layoffs, look at like even Meta and ByteDance saying like we're gonna up the expectations on our employees. So instead of firing people, we're just gonna make it harder for you to the point where like you have to quit. Like shit is tough out there.
Mm.
So, and if it's tough out there, like there's also companies cutting back on the budget that I thought were gonna give me. You know what I mean? So it's not easy.
Mm,
It's terrifying. And even if I did want to go back to corporate, would there even be a role for me? Like, I left a cushy job. Like, it's one of the hottest apps in the world. I was leading the biggest account at the company globally. It's the job that I've always wanted my entire career. And I was like, this wasn't enough for me. You know what I mean? So I think about it really often, but I think I said this last episode. If I didn't leave when I left, a lot of the blessings that have happened to me so far wouldn't have happened. I'll probably do like 30 speaking engagements this year with some really dope companies that y'all all work at right now. And I wouldn't have done that if like I haven't quit my job. But yeah. So is it worth it? I mean, I think so far, but we'll see we'll see in the future, you know?